I never imagined that the happiest day of my daughter's life would become the most painful memory of mine. From the moment she was born, I dedicated my life to raising her with love, sacrifice, and pride. I worked long hours, often skipping meals, just to make sure she could have a good education, nice clothes, and everything she ever dreamed of. But as she grew older, something began to change. She started caring too much about appearances. She was embarrassed by my weight, my looks, and even my simple way of dressing. She would avoid introducing me to her friends, and when I asked why, she always said, "Dad, you wouldn't understand." When her wedding day came closer, I was excited. I saved money to buy her the best gift I could afford. I dreamed of walking her down the aisle, of being there for her big moment. But then the unexpected happened. One evening, she came to me with cold eyes and said words I will never forget. "Dad, I don't want you at my wedding. You're too ugly. You'll embarrass me in front of everyone." It felt like a knife straight to my heart. I couldn't believe my own daughter, my little girl whom I raised with so much love, would say such a thing. For days, I locked myself in my room, replaying her words over and over. My chest felt heavy and tears rolled down my cheeks every night. But something inside me refused to give up. I thought about all the nights I carried her when she was sick, all the times I worked extra shifts just to buy her school books, and all the sacrifices I made so she could live her dreams. And then I decided, whether she wanted me there or not, I was going to attend her wedding, not to embarrass her, but to remind her who I truly was, her father. On the wedding day, I dressed in my best suit, even though it was a little tight. I stood outside the hall, my heart pounding like a drum. The guards looked at me suspiciously, but when I walked in, silence filled the room. All eyes turned toward me. Guests froze in shock. My daughter, holding a champagne glass, looked at me as if she had seen a ghost. Her hand trembled, and the glass slipped, crashing to the floor. The entire hall was stunned. And that was the moment everything changed.
The sound of the champagne glass shattering echoed across the hall. Guests gasped, and a hush fell over the music and laughter. For a moment, all you could hear was the faint sound of broken glass rolling across the polished floor. My daughter stood frozen, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. I could see it in her face, fear, shock, maybe even shame. She had told me not to come, yet there I was, standing in the doorway in my old but freshly pressed black suit. My hands shook slightly, but I held my head high. I wasn't there to fight. I wasn't there to cause a scene. I was there because I was her father, and nothing could erase that. The guests began whispering. "Who was that man? Is he family? Why is the bride so surprised to see him here tonight?" Some looked at me with pity, others with curiosity, but I ignored them all. My eyes were fixed on my daughter. I could see tears forming, though she tried to hold them back. I took a slow step forward, then another. Each step echoed like thunder in my heart. I wanted to hug her, to tell her I loved her, but I knew the moment wasn't right. Instead, I looked around the hall at the dozens of guests, her husband's family, friends, coworkers, everyone who believed they knew her story. And then I spoke, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice breaking the silence, "I apologize for interrupting this beautiful celebration. I am the bride's father. I know some of you may be wondering why she looks so surprised to see me here tonight." Gasps rippled through the room. My daughter lowered her gaze, her cheeks burning red. I continued. "She asked me not to come. She thought I might embarrass her. She thought I wasn't good enough. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. I could see some people shake their heads, others staring at my daughter with judgment, but I lifted my hand to stop them. "But let me tell you something," I said firmly. "There is no shame in being a father who gave everything for his child. There was no shame in the wrinkles on my face, the scars on my hands, or the extra weight I carry. These are the marks of sacrifice, of years spent working hard so that my daughter could have a life better than mine." My throat tightened, but I forced myself to keep speaking. "When she was little, she used to run into my arms every time she was scared. She used to hold my hand when crossing the street. She used to call me her hero. And today, even if she sees me as ugly or unworthy, I am still her father. Nothing will ever change that." The hall was silent again. Not even the band dared to play. Some guests had tears in their eyes. The groom looked stunned, glancing from me to his bride, unsure what to say. And then, something I never expected happened. My daughter burst into tears. She dropped to her knees, covering her face with her hands, and sobbed uncontrollably. The makeup she had so carefully applied began to run down her cheeks. She looked like a little girl again, lost, ashamed, and broken. I rushed forward, forgetting about the crowd, forgetting about the whispers. I bent down and gently lifted her up, holding her in my arms. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. She cried against my chest, whispering through tears, "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The hall filled with sniffles and murmurs. The guests expected a scandal, but what they witnessed was something else entirely. A father's love and a daughter's regret. I held her tightly and whispered back, "Shh, it's okay, sweetheart. I never stopped loving you. I never will." At that moment, the applause began. Slowly at first, then louder and louder. The guests stood clapping with tears in their eyes. Even the groom's parents wiped their cheeks. It wasn't the kind of wedding interruption they expected. It was a moment of truth, of forgiveness, of love stronger than pride. And that night, my daughter finally remembered who I was. Not just a man she called too ugly, but the father who had loved her unconditionally since the day she was born. But little did I know, this was only the beginning of what that night would bring.
As the applause slowly died down, I felt the weight of my daughter's tears soaking through my suit. She looked up at me, her mascara smudged, her face no longer the picture-perfect bride everyone had admired just moments ago. Yet in that raw, vulnerable moment, she was more beautiful to me than ever before. Because she was real. She was my little girl again. The groom stepped forward, his face pale. He cleared his throat nervously, glancing at the guests, then at me. "Sir, I didn't know. She never told me you weren't invited. If I had known—" His voice trailed off. His eyes looked sincere, but also confused. I gave him a small nod. "You don't need to explain, son. This isn't about you. It's between me and my daughter." He nodded, and for the first time, I could see respect in his eyes. The guests were still buzzing, whispering to each other. Some looked ashamed, as though they had judged me too quickly when I first entered. Others looked inspired, clearly touched by what they had just witnessed. The wedding planner rushed over, trying to restore order. The band was asked to play soft music again, but the atmosphere had changed completely. It was no longer just a celebration of two people getting married. It had become something much deeper, a story about forgiveness, truth, and family. My daughter wiped her tears and held my hand tightly, as if she was afraid to let go. Then, in front of everyone, she spoke through her shaky voice. "Dad, I don't deserve you. I let my pride blind me. I thought appearances mattered more than love, and I forgot everything you did for me. Can you ever forgive me?" The room went silent again, all ears waiting for my answer. I looked at her, my heart aching with both sadness and joy. "Sweetheart, a father doesn't need to forgive his daughter for forgetting. A father's love doesn't break. It just waits, and mine has been waiting for this moment." Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief. She hugged me tighter than ever, and the guests broke into applause once more. But as I stood there holding her in my arms, I noticed something strange. In the corner of the hall, an elderly woman dressed in a modest gown was staring at me with a faint smile. She looked familiar, though I couldn't place her. She clapped slowly, her eyes glistening with emotion, as if she knew me, or knew my story. I pushed the thought aside and focused on the ceremony. The officiant tried to continue, but the energy of the wedding had shifted. Instead of stiff formality, the ceremony became warm, emotional, and deeply personal. Guests wiped tears, whispered about the power of love, and looked at me as though I had just taught them a lesson. After the vows were exchanged and the kiss sealed the union, the reception began. Music returned, food was served, and laughter filled the hall again. But this time, people weren't avoiding me. They were approaching me. One by one, guests came to shake my hand. "You must be proud," one man said. "You raised a wonderful daughter," said another woman with tears in her eyes. "You reminded me of my own father," another whispered, her voice breaking. I smiled politely, though my heart was heavy with the memory of what had been said to me only days earlier. Still, I accepted their words. Perhaps they finally saw what I had always known, that true worth has nothing to do with looks. As the night went on, the mysterious elderly woman I'd noticed earlier approached me. She had kind eyes and a warm smile. "You don't remember me, do you?" she asked. I shook my head slowly. "I'm sorry, I don't." She placed a gentle arm on my arm. "Years ago, when I had nothing, you helped me. You gave me food from your shop when my children were hungry. I never forgot your kindness." My eyes widened. The memories came rushing back. She was right. I remembered a struggling mother who used to come by late at night, ashamed to ask for help. I had given her bread, rice, and milk whenever I could. She smiled. Tonight, the world saw what I saw all those years ago. A man with a heart far more beautiful than any face. Her words struck me like lightning, and tears filled my eyes, but I blinked them away. Before I could respond, my daughter walked up beside me, holding my hand, and looked at the woman curiously. "Dad, who is she?" And in that moment, I realized my daughter was about to learn even more about the man she once called too ugly. The moment the elderly woman spoke, my daughter's curious eyes searched my face for answers. She looked confused, almost unsettled. "Dad, who is she?" she asked again, gripping my hand tightly. I smiled faintly and turned to my daughter. "Sweetheart, when you were just a baby, I ran a small grocery shop. It wasn't much, but it kept food on our table. This woman, she used to come at night with 2 little children. She was struggling, and she didn't have enough money to buy food. I gave her what I could, sometimes bread, sometimes milk. I didn't ask for anything in return. I just wanted to help." The elderly woman's eyes glistened with tears. She nodded slowly. "Your father was my angel during the darkest time of my life. Without him, I don't know if my children would have survived." The guests nearby gasped. Whispers spread through the hall again, but this time they weren't whispers of judgment. They were whispers of admiration. People looked at me not with pity, but with respect. My daughter's lips trembled. She turned to me with eyes full of regret. "Dad, all this time I was ashamed of how you looked. I never once thought about what you had done for others. I only cared about appearances. But you," she paused, her voice cracking, "you were out there saving lives, even when I was too young to notice." Her words pierced through me, both painful and healing at the same time. I gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, love doesn't keep count of sacrifices. I never wanted recognition. I only wanted you to have a life where you didn't have to suffer the way I did." At that moment, the groom stepped forward. He had been silent, watching everything unfold. With a deep breath, he bowed his head toward me. "Sir, I want to thank you, not just for raising the woman I love, but for showing me tonight what real strength looks like. I promise you, I will honor her, protect her, and make her proud, just as you did all these years." The sincerity in his voice moved me. I could see my daughter holding back tears again, but this time, they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of gratitude. The elderly woman, still standing beside me, reached into her purse and pulled out an old, faded photograph. She handed it to my daughter. "These are my children, the ones your father helped save. They're grown now, with families of their own. Tonight they couldn't be here, but they wanted me to give you this photo as a reminder that your father's kindness changed lives beyond his own family." My daughter held the photograph with trembling hands. She stared at it for a long time, then looked at me with eyes full of emotion. "Dad, I don't deserve you," she whispered. I smiled softly. "It's not about deserving, sweetheart. It's about love. And my love for you doesn't depend on anything, not appearances, not mistakes, not even hurtful words. It's unconditional." At that moment, something unexpected happened. The DJ, perhaps sensing the emotional weight of the night, played a soft, old song. The kind of music I used to hum while rocking my daughter to sleep when she was little. My daughter froze, recognizing it instantly. Slowly, she reached out her hand. "Dad," she said, her voice quivering, "will you dance with me?" The hall fell silent once more. Every guest turned to watch as I took her hand and stepped onto the dance floor. The bride, in her stunning white dress, and her father, in his worn-out but neatly pressed suit, began to sway to the music. At first, my steps were awkward, but then I looked into her eyes, and suddenly I wasn't at a wedding anymore. I was back in our old house, holding her tiny hands as she stood on my shoes, learning how to dance for the first time. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I love you, Dad. I should have said it more often." "I know you do," I replied softly, "and that's all I ever needed." The guests erupted into applause once again, but this time it wasn't just polite clapping. It was thunderous, heartfelt, and filled with emotion. People stood on their feet, some crying, some smiling, all touched by what they had just witnessed. But as the song ended, and I stepped back, something inside me stirred, a sense that this story wasn't finished yet. There was still more to come. Because just as I was about to leave the dance floor, a man I had never seen before walked toward me. He wore an expensive suit and carried himself with authority. He looked straight into my eyes and said words that sent a chill down my spine. "Sir, I've been looking for you for a long time. We need to talk." privately."
The man's voice was calm, but carried a weight that silenced the noise around us. My daughter squeezed my hand nervously. The guests, sensing something unusual, whispered among themselves, but I gave my daughter a reassuring nod. "It's all right," I whispered to her. Then I turned to the man. "If you need to talk, let's step outside." We walked toward the garden behind the hall, where fairy lights twinkled and the sound of laughter from inside felt distant. The night air was cool, but my heart was racing. I had no idea who this man was or what he wanted from me. He introduced himself. "My name is Richard Carter," he said firmly, extending his hand. I shook it cautiously. "I know tonight is your daughter's wedding, and I don't mean to intrude, but I had to come. I've been searching for you for years." My eyebrows furrowed. "Searching for me? Why?" He took a deep breath. "Because you saved my life, and I owe you more than you can imagine." I stared at him, confused. "Saved my life? I don't remember." He quickly interrupted. "It was more than 20 years ago. You probably forgot, but I never did." Richard's voice trembled slightly as he continued. "I was just a boy, living on the streets. My father was an addict, my mother had left, and I had nothing. One cold winter night, I collapsed outside your little grocery store. Do you remember? A teenage boy, half-starved, shivering on the sidewalk." The memory suddenly flashed back. I could almost see it. A scrawny boy, lips blue from the cold, trembling outside my shop door. I had brought him inside, wrapped him in an old blanket, and given him warm soup. I even gave him odd jobs in the shop until he was strong enough to survive on his own. My eyes widened. "Was that you?" Richard nodded, his eyes glistening. "Yes, that was me. You didn't just feed me. You gave me dignity when no one else would. You gave me hope. Because of you, I turned my life around. I worked hard, went to school, and eventually built my own business. Today, I am who I am because of you." I stood frozen, my chest tightening. My daughter, who had followed us outside, covered her mouth in shock as she listened. Richard continued, his voice full of emotion. "I know you never asked for anything in return, but I've been waiting for the day I could repay you. And when I finally tracked you down and heard what happened with your daughter tonight, I knew I had to come." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek black folder. Handing it to me, he said, "This is for you." I hesitated, opening the folder slowly. Inside were legal documents, bank papers, and property deeds. My hands shook as I realized what I was holding. "This," Richard explained, "is ownership of a company I built. I want you to have a share in it. You worked your entire life, sacrificing everything for others. Now it's time you live with dignity, comfort, and respect. You deserve that much." Tears welled in my eyes. I shook my head. "I don't need this. I never helped you for money or rewards." "I know," Richard said gently. "That's why you deserve it even more. Please, let me do this, not just for you, but for the boy you saved so long ago." My daughter, now openly crying, grabbed my arm. "Dad, do you see? This is who you really are. You thought you were just an ordinary man, but to so many people, you've been a hero." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my vision blurred with tears. All my life, I had believed I was nothing more than a simple man, too plain, too rough, even too ugly for my daughter. But in that moment, I realized the truth. Kindness had given me a beauty that appearances could never take away. Finally, I looked at Richard and said, "If you truly want to repay me, then don't repay me with money. Repay me by helping someone else in need. Pass it forward. That's all I ask." Richard's eyes filled with respect. He nodded slowly. "Then that's what I'll do.
but I'll still make sure you and your daughter never have to struggle again." As we stood there under the fairy lights, my daughter hugged me tighter than she ever had before. "Dad," she whispered, "I promise, from today, I will never be ashamed of you again. You're the greatest man I've ever known." And for the first time that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. But just as I thought the night had finally settled, another unexpected voice called from the shadows of the garden. "Excuse me, are you Mr. Johnson? Because if you are, I think you may also be my father." The garden lights flickered softly as the mysterious voice cut through the air. My heart skipped a beat. I turned around and saw a young man, maybe in his late 20s, standing in the shadows. His eyes were fixed on me, filled with uncertainty and hope. "Are you Mr. Johnson?" he asked again, his voice trembling. I hesitated. "Yes, that's me." He took a deep breath and stepped closer. The guests inside continued laughing and celebrating, unaware that outside another storm was about to begin. The young man's hands shook as he pulled a worn photograph from his pocket. He handed it to me. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. It was a picture of me, years ago, standing outside my old grocery store. Beside me in the photo was a woman I vaguely remembered, holding the hand of a small child. "This woman," he said, pointing at her, "was my mother. She passed away last year. Before she died, she told me something I could hardly believe. She said you might be my father." My knees weakened. I stared at the photograph, my mind spinning. Memories of long nights at the shop, of helping people in need, came rushing back. And yes, I remembered her. She had come often, asking for food. She was kind, gentle, and I had comforted her during her struggles. But I never knew. I don't know what to say," I whispered. My daughter, still standing beside me, froze in shock. Her grip on my arm tightened. "Dad, is this true? Do I have a brother?" The young man's eyes watered. "I don't want to cause trouble. I don't want to ruin your family. But my mother told me to find you. She said you were a good man and that if I ever felt lost, I should seek you out. She said you were the only man she ever loved." Silence filled the garden. Richard Carter, the businessman, stood nearby, watching the scene with sympathy but staying quiet. I swallowed hard. My chest felt heavy, as though the weight of the past had suddenly come crashing down on me. "Son," I said carefully, "I can't deny the truth of your mother's words. I cared for her deeply, but I never knew she had my child. I never knew about you." The young man's lips quivered. "So, it's true? You're my father?" Before I could answer, my daughter suddenly stepped forward. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with emotion. "Wait, if this is true, then you're my brother." The young man nodded slowly. "I guess so." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. My daughter stared at him, tears running down her cheeks. Then, in a surprising act of grace, she opened her arms and embraced him. "You're family," she whispered, "and family doesn't need to be perfect to be real. Dad taught me that tonight." The young man broke down, sobbing in her arms. I felt my own tears spilling over as I stepped forward and placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "I may have failed to know you when you were young, but if you'll let me, I want to be your father now." He nodded desperately, hugging me tightly. For the first time in decades, I felt the strange, beautiful weight of having not one, but two children. Inside the hall, the music swelled, and people danced without knowing the drama unfolding in the garden. But for me, this was more than drama. It was a second chance, a new chapter I never expected. Richard Carter finally broke the silence, his voice filled with wonder. "Mr. Johnson, tonight has shown me something I'll never forget. You may not see it yourself, but you're a man who has given more love and hope than most people do in a lifetime. You didn't just raise a daughter. You saved strangers, and now you found a son you never knew you had. If that's not extraordinary, I don't know what is." My daughter wiped her tears and looked at her new brother, then at me. "Dad, maybe tonight was never about embarrassment or appearances. Maybe it was about showing everyone who you really are. A father, a savior, a man who changes lives." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the truth sink in. Whole my life I had been ashamed of my flaws, my looks, my simplicity. But standing there, with both my children by my side, I realized something powerful. True beauty isn't in the face, it's in the heart that never stops giving. The young man finally smiled through his tears. "Thank you, Dad." And for the first time in years, I felt complete. But even as peace washed over me, a lingering thought whispered in the back of my mind. Why did his mother wait until her deathbed to reveal the truth? Something told me there was still one more secret waiting to surface.
The hall had fallen into complete silence. My daughter's eyes were wide with disbelief, and I could see anger mixed with something else. Fear, maybe? The whispers among the guests grew louder, each one like a dagger slicing through the air. "Is that her father?" someone muttered. "I heard she didn't invite him. Why would she do that? He looks kind." My daughter clenched her fists and finally walked toward me, her wedding dress shimmering under the golden lights. She forced a smile to keep her composure in front of everyone, but her trembling lips gave her away. "Dad, what are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice sharp, but low enough that only I could hear. I looked at her with calm eyes, though my heart was heavy. "I came to see my daughter get married. Is that too much for a father to ask?" Her cheeks flushed red, partly from anger, partly from shame. "You weren't supposed to come. I told you." "You told me I'd embarrass you. But look around, my child. Who's embarrassed now? You or me?" Her head dropped for a moment. She didn't answer. Then the groom's parents stepped closer. They had been watching carefully, and I could see confusion on their faces. The groom's mother, dressed elegantly in a navy gown, asked, "Why would you hide your father? He seems like a man of dignity." The room buzzed again. My daughter's face turned pale. For the first time, she had to face the consequences of her words. I sighed deeply. "I may not be handsome, and I may not have riches, but every scar, every wrinkle on my face is because I worked for her, for this day, for her dreams." My voice broke as I continued. "I carried her in my arms when she was sick. I went hungry so she could eat. I wore old clothes so she could wear new ones. If that's embarrassing, then maybe love itself is an embarrassment." There was a gasp from the guests. I could see tears forming in the eyes of some older women. A man at the back even clapped once before realizing the heaviness of the moment. My daughter's lips trembled, her eyes glistened. She tried to hold back her tears, but they betrayed her. The weight of her decision was finally crashing down on her. The groom gently took her hand and whispered something. Though I couldn't hear, I saw her shake her head slightly as if ashamed. And then she fell to her knees before me. "Dad," her voice cracked, breaking the silence, "I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was selfish. I thought people would laugh at me because of you. But I realize now, I'm the one who has been shameful." Her tears stained the marble floor as she sobbed. Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd again, but this time it was filled with emotion. My knees weakened, and I almost broke down right there. For years, I had been waiting for her to truly see me, not as someone to hide, but as her father. At that moment, I didn't care about the whispers or the stares. All I wanted was to hold her like I did when she was little. I bent down slowly and pulled her into my arms. She clung to me, crying uncontrollably. And in that embrace, it felt as if the walls of pride and shame finally crumbled. But just as I thought peace had been restored, a new voice boomed across the hall.
The entire hall was frozen in emotion as my daughter clung to me, tears soaking into my old suit. The whispers had turned into silence, and many of the guests were wiping their own eyes. It seemed like the night had found peace, until a sharp, commanding voice echoed through the microphone. "Enough!" Everyone turned toward the stage. The groom's father, a tall, stern-looking man in a black tuxedo, stood up with a hardened expression. His voice carried authority, and the room instantly quieted. "I cannot believe what I am seeing here," he said slowly, his eyes fixed on my daughter. "You humiliated your own father, the man who gave you life, for the sake of appearances? Is this the kind of family my son is marrying into?" Gasps spread through the crowd. The groom's mother tried to tug at her husband's sleeve, whispering for him to calm down, but he pulled away. My daughter's face turned white. "Sir, please, Don't you dare make excuses! If you cannot respect your father, how will you respect my son? Marriage is built on honor, loyalty, and gratitude, and right now you've shown none of those." The room felt heavy. My daughter's sobs grew louder, her whole body shaking. I wanted to step in and defend her, but before I could, the groom walked up beside her. "Father," he said firmly, his tone calm but unyielding, "this is my choice. She made mistakes, but so have we all. What matters is that she realizes them, and I will not let you destroy her on our wedding day." His words surprised everyone, even me. The hall murmured again, this time with admiration. The groom reached down and helped my daughter to her feet, then looked directly at me. "Sir," he said respectfully, his voice filled with warmth, "would you do me the honor of giving your daughter away? Walk her down the aisle as you should have from the beginning." My heart stopped. For years I had imagined this moment, dreamed of holding her hand and walking beside her to a new life. I had accepted that dream was lost, but now it was being handed back to me. Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded, unable to find the words. My daughter turned to me, her face red and wet with tears, and whispered, "Please, Dad, I need you." The music began to play again. The guests, now standing, watched as I took her trembling hand in mine. My old, calloused fingers wrapped around hers, and together we began the walk down the aisle. Step by step, the shame, anger, and bitterness melted away. What remained was love, the bond of a father and daughter, bruised but unbroken. And when we reached the altar, the groom bowed his head to me and whispered, "Thank you for raising her. I promise I'll protect her from now on." For the first time in many years, I felt proud, not because of what people thought, but because in that moment I knew I hadn't failed as a father. But just as the vows were about to begin, the doors of the hall creaked open once again, and someone unexpected walked in. The music faded as the heavy wooden doors creaked open. All eyes turned. A hush fell over the hall once again. At the entrance stood an older woman, dressed modestly, with silver hair pulled back into a bun. She held a cane, her posture slightly bent, but her presence was commanding. My heart skipped a beat because it was my mother, my daughter's grandmother. She hadn't been invited either. Gasps rippled through the guests as she slowly walked inside. My daughter froze in shock. The groom's family whispered among themselves. "Mom," I breathed, stunned. Her voice, though frail, carried across the hall. "So, you tried to hide your father? And me too? Your own grandmother?" My daughter's face turned pale again. She stuttered, "Grandma, I didn't mean—" But my mother raised her hand. Silence. The hall went still. The old woman's eyes glistened with both sorrow and strength. "When you were a child, I carried you on my back. I gave you sweets when your father could not afford them. And now, at the most important moment of your life, you choose shame over family. Child, beauty fades, wealth fades, but the people who love you, if you throw them away, you will lose everything." Her words hit like thunder. Guests murmured, some nodding. My daughter burst into tears again, her whole body trembling. She collapsed at her grandmother's feet. "Grandma, please forgive me. I was blind. I thought love was about perfection, but it's not. It's about sacrifice, about family. I was so wrong." The old woman bent slowly, touched her granddaughter's face, and whispered, "You are forgiven, but never forget, without roots, even the most beautiful flower withers." The hall erupted in soft applause. The groom's father, who had been stern, now lowered his head in shame. The groom himself wiped away a tear, then gently helped my daughter stand again. The priest cleared his throat slightly. "Shall we begin again?" And so the ceremony continued. This time there was no pretense, no mask. I stood by my daughter, holding her hand until she placed it in the groom's. When the vows were spoken, they were no longer just promises between two people. They were also a silent vow between a father and daughter, a vow of forgiveness, love, and unity. When they kissed, the room filled with cheers and claps. My heart, once heavy, finally felt light. After the ceremony, my daughter came to me, her eyes swollen from crying, but her smile pure and genuine. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "Dad, you are not my embarrassment. You are my pride. From now on, I will never hide you again." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I held her. "That's all I ever wanted, my child." And as the lights sparkled across the hall and music filled the air once more, I realized something. The pain, the shame, the heartbreak, it had all been worth it. Because in the end, love triumphed. Not the kind of love that dazzles with beauty, but the kind of love that endures scars, wrinkles, sacrifices, and years of silent devotion. A father's love. And finally, a daughter's love too.